Welcome to Tippcast by the Nenagh Guardian. Hello and welcome to Tippcast with myself, Shane Stapleton, Shane Brophy of the Nenagh Guardian, and Ed Donnelly of Munster GA. Men, how are we doing?
Good, Shane. Good. Well, Ed, how are you?
Oh, good.
Good. Look, we'll jump straight to it. Loughmore finally got it done there in terms of winning the county title, and they had all that disappointment last year. Obviously, the drawn game in the hurling final a few weeks ago. But Shane Brophy, in its Semple Stadium, what was it like when John Mcgrath knocked in that late winning goal?
Sure, look, you could. I'd say there was probably no more than 2,000 at the game. Like, with God, it felt like a winning goal of a Munster final. Like, you just knew once it hit the net that Loughmore weren't going to be beaten. And I know it was very similar to what Kildangan did to Loughmore last year. Not quite, I suppose, like Commercials, I think, they scored after it and maybe had a half chance of maybe getting an equaliser, but it wasn't far off it. And I suppose if there was one way for Loughmore, this Loughmore team over the last 2 years to break their silverware duck, that was it. Like, it was sure, look, it was a very, very similar to the hurling final the week before. They got off to a bad start, 1-2 to no score down after 5 minutes, but once they settled, they were, I would say, they probably shaded it thereafter. They dominated the ball. They probably had more of the chances, but look, they were still trailing going into injury time. And look, I just think the whole goal itself epitomized Loughmore, the way after the free fell short from Conor Ryan, like they just harried and hounded Michael Murphy and turned him over and took 4 quick hand passes into John and into the back of the net. Like, so it was, if there was a way to break their duck, that was the way to do it.
Yeah, but what was your read on the game and the finale we had?
Yeah, I'm a proud McCarthy man. I won't say that I've been too happy with Loughmore over the years, but my hands went up in the air and I jumped when that goal went in. Having seen Loughmore suffer, I suppose, so much last year, the heartache of losing the 2 county finals. Indeed, you could say the heartache last week when they thought maybe they had a chance to beat the Sars. I think it's fantastic. There was no neutrals at that point. I don't think in Semple Stadium. It was absolutely great to see them get over the line. I'm not sure how they're going to do in the hurling. It's a different day's work, but certainly I was delighted to see them get some silverware, because by God, that club, if any club, deserves to get something out of all the efforts they put in the last couple of years. But of course, they're at this for many years.
Shane, just looking at I thought there was a huge momentum shift in the 51st minute. You know, Clonmel were in control. Ross Peters had a one-on-one chance for a goal. That would have buried the game at that stage for Clonmel and would have set up the 3 in a row, first one in, I think, over half a decade. But within 30 seconds then of the goal chance being missed, Seamus Kennedy was then black carded. So that was just a massive momentum shift.
Oh, it was, and I'd say it wasn't a 1-on-1, it was a 3-on-1 they messed up. And it was, again, you go back to the week before, like it was Joey Hennessy again, his intervention, he just did enough to put off Ross Peters from getting a proper connection, and he just kind of mishit the shot, and it was an easy save for Shane Hennessy. Peters probably should have laid the ball on. I can't remember who is to his left, and it would have been an easy goal, and that would have been that. But look, I suppose Clonmel know themselves. The longer you leave Loughmore hanging in a game, the more that you're asking for trouble. And look, then as you say, the black card happened. I was actually writing down the note from the missed chance, so I didn't actually see the incident to know whether it was a deserved black card or not. Like, so, look, but in fairness to Clonmel, they actually dug deep after that black card. I think they got the very next score to go 3 points up, and then Loughmore got a couple of points. Then they brought on Brian Mcgrath, and I was looking at the way they were banding his hand up, like it was really desperation stakes. It was like I think they knew that Brian really couldn't give an awful lot really with the broken thumb. But look, he was himself and Liam were in the instigators in the turnover that led to the winning goal. Like, so, look, I think you've got to say the one thing about Loughmore, they never panic. Like, you're 1-2 to 5 points down, even 2-6 to 4 down against Arsenal the week before in hurling. They just don't panic. They work their way back into the game, and like they dominated the ball in the football final once they got going. I know that the free count is 27-11 against Clonmel, but like a lot of that is because Loughmore dominated possession. They were very methodical in what it was a real contrast in styles, and if Ed agrees, like Loughmore were far more methodical with the ball, whereas Clonmel, once they got it, they like to try and get up the field as quick as possible, and sometimes they turned it over a bit cheaply and maybe ended up in cul-de-sacs. But I think there probably would be claims for Clonmel that were probably entitled maybe 5 or 6 more frees. Whether they should have been evened out, like I don't agree with that thing. I think the team that dominates the ball will always win more frees, but I did think there was probably 3 or 4 occasions for Clonmel maybe didn't get the benefit of it out in terms of maybe frees that went their way.
Yeah. Ed, a question for you. Like as Shane said there, they bandaged up Brian Mcgrath and threw him on. I think maybe people outside the county would think Tipperary is a hurling county only and hurling always comes first. But it kind of just showed how much of a dual club they are, that they were willing to risk throwing Brian Mcgrath on, knowing that, who knows, maybe he'd end up missing the hurling replay next week on the back of it. But it just shows how much of a dual club they are.
Yeah, and I saw the interview with Brian afterwards on Tip FM, and obviously he wore his heart on his sleeve there. He was pure delighted to make any contribution because, as you say, with a broken thumb, it's very difficult, I'm sure, to play the hurling, never mind trying to handle the football. But when that turnover happened for the goal, if you look at I suppose the skill that Brian had just to kind of, the way he bounced the ball to get away from the Clonmel Commercials man and then set up, I think, Kieran and onto Liam and onto John and bang. So Brian, as we know, is an excellent footballer. I think he would have played in an All-Ireland minor football final back in 2015. So, to be missing him and to be missing John Maher, I mean, for a club team, that's massive. So for Brian to come on and play whatever it was, the 3 or 4 minutes of normal time and whatever an extra time or injury time, it was great. And as I say, he did play an important role in setting up that goal.
Yeah. So Shane, just even to dwell into it a little bit more, some of the changes that have been made from last year, David Kennedy talked about it afterwards, about 6 changes from the final last year. John Maher obviously didn't make the game with a hamstring injury, Brian Mcgrath and so on. I mean, at a club level, to make 6 changes between, county finals that are, 12 months apart, maybe 14 months apart at this stage, geez, that's some going.
Oh, it is, but I think it's full proof of, I suppose, the culture that's in Loughmore. Like that, there's always guys coming along. You see the like John Maher is missing, but like his younger brother Ed slotted in there at centre back, and like he's only 17, 18 years of age or young. I think he's around that, and didn't miss a beat. I thought Eamon Connolly in the middle of the field probably was very, very good. Conor Ryan corner forward was excellent. I think he's going to be. I'd be surprised if he doesn't maybe see a lot of action maybe for the Tip senior footballer next year. But like he's a confident finisher. I think like I haven't inquired. Like there was an Owen Ryan who played Tip under 20 last year. He doesn't seem to be on the panel this year. He maybe has a long-term injury or something. So like they have so much depth there. Like I think people think that hurling, maybe they're in Tip, you should be hurling first, but like Loughmore's tradition was football first before hurling. Like the football tradition was gone back 120 years really as a hurling force. It's only in the last 40 or 50 they've got things going. Like, so they definitely weren't going to throw their nose up at a football title when it came along. And I think the momentum I think they're going to take off this into next Sunday is going to be incredible. Like it's like I think Thurles Sarsfields are going to have to produce something special now just to stop them. Like, because you can only imagine that there'll be no aches or pains after the match this week. Like that they'll be just eager, looking forward to 3:15 next Sunday.
So Ed, do you think, like, I mean, obviously this is speculation, but Loughmore, their chances of winning the hurling final helped by winning the football, because now they're on a bounce, the confidence is there. Or if they had to lose it, maybe you'd be thinking, all right, we have to dig deep. We can't lose 4 county finals in 2 years. So do you think they're coming in like with a positive bounce now and therefore more dangerous for Sars?
I think absolutely helped. I'm not sure how they would have raised themselves. I'm not sure how they did it last year when they lost the hurling in the last minute and then had to go out and play the football a week later and still only lost by a point, I think. But absolutely, I think the momentum, the relief of getting over the line, of getting that silverware, I think, certainly will help them. I think Starshes, having said that, probably have more room for improvement. But, having said that, that momentum, and let's hope that, John Maher didn't play last Sunday. Let's hope he's able to play. Brian Mcgrath, I'm presuming, will play or start certainly for Loughmore. But, I think Loughmore certainly have momentum going into this. But as I said, the Sars certainly have more room for improvement, so it's going to make for a really interesting duel next Sunday.
And logistically, putting your Munster GA hat on there, Ed, assuming Loughmore were to go on and win the hurling, in terms of fixtures, would it be still week on week on week for them?
Yeah, week on week. So there is a fixture for, what would it be, Sunday week, the 5th of December. They're going up to Cusack Park to play Aero Guinness in the football. And then if they win the hurling, I think it's the winner of Ballygunner and Ballyea, who are also playing next Sunday. If that's Ballygunner, as I expected, maybe that would be in Walsh Park. So as if things weren't hard enough, they're going to have to travel potentially away in their 2 Munster club matches. But listen, it is what it is. I'm sure they'll take everything in their stride, but they'll worry about Sunday first of all.
Yeah, a word, Shane, on Clonmel Commercials. Obviously won the last 2 titles. They're a very strong team. Watched them for a lot of the game. I was like, guy, the shape these lads are in, the quality that they have. Michael Quinlivan making a 60-yard dash, just gliding past players at one stage. Like, they're a serious football team, and few would expect them to not bounce back.
They should look. I think they're the strongest team, and I think that's the greatest depth of any football club in the county at the moment. Just like it'll hurt them because 3 in a row don't come along very often, and they came up short and they have to start all over again. But I thought from their point of view, I think the loss of Jack Kennedy to injury at halftime was big. He's a quality player. He might have been he's a great guy to maybe pick a lock in an opposition defence, and he might have been able to create that maybe one or two pieces of magic that would have maybe created an extra score or two, would have got them over the line. Like the likes of Sean O'Connor, he's young. I suppose they would have hoped for maybe a small bit more from him, but I thought Joey Hennessy did a super job on him. Michael Quinlivan, apart from the goal, was probably pretty. It was a brilliant finish, but apart from that, he was pretty quiet. I think they'll probably feel themselves. Maybe apart from Jason Lonergan and Jamie Peters and Conal Kennedy, probably just didn't get enough of their big players maybe sparking on the day.
Yeah. Okay. Well, look, we've heard this week that Brian Fox, a football giant in Tipperary terms, that he's after retiring following a 14-year career with Tipperary. Made his senior debut in 2009 against Limerick, and also he won that Munster title in 2020. How big of an influence has he been, Ed, to the footballers over the years?
I think massive, because the role that he has played, he's certainly one of the leaders of that team. They got to 2 All-Ireland semi-finals over the last 5 or 6 years. And the role, as I say, he's often been that kind of 7th defender or sweeper or whatever they call it in the modern day. And it just gets on so much ball, and is able to take the right option every time. And that's not to say he's not able to score. I think I remember him popping up with a point in the last minute of extra time against Limerick. That was last year. All the years of going together with this COVID. The day that Conor Sweeney obviously got the headlines for the equaliser in normal time, but it was Brian that just went on a solar run that never ended, and he just figured, where am I going to put it over the bar? And we won by a point. And obviously we know what happened thereafter. So, Brian has given absolutely outstanding service to Andy McCarthy, obviously, but to Tipperary football, he's just been immense, and certainly he's going to be a hard act to follow, I think.
Yeah, Shane, it's not always fashionable to be a Tipperary footballer, sometimes operating in the lower divisions, sometimes having heavy defeats in the championship, but he's been there throughout it all in the bad times, and obviously getting his rewards in the good times, like Ed said, those 2 All-Ireland semi-finals and that brilliant Munster title win. Oh,
definitely. And from a personal point of view, I think he's been one of my favourite players through this run of the last 10 or 12 years, because you always knew that he was going to perform. He was more or less the consistent factor on the team, and anytime you didn't see his name on the team sheet, or if he was held back on the bench, you worried, because he, as Ed said, he sort of played that deep lying half back role, and he put out a lot of fires. He was very, very good at reading the play and cutting out opposition attacks and starting attacks and going up the other end. And I just thought, look, he was small in stature, big in heart. I think that's the way you describe him. I remarked to him when I was mentioned in the paper this week, the 2016 semi-final against Mayo. And I still remember the image of Aidan O'Shea getting the ball, and he took a run at Brian Fox. I was like, God Almighty, this is David against Goliath, and Foxy turned him over without foul and Tip went up the other end and I think got a free for a score. Like, he just said the bigger the man, the more he relished it. I just thought he's look, he must have been a dream in the dressing room for all the managers the last few years to try and bring along some of those young lads and take them by the hand and show them the way of what a leader is on the field and off the field. And like, he's just going to be such a loss in that dressing room next year, particularly. Like, and I suppose there's probably an element of a rebuild has to start now. We're in Division 4, and when you're in Division 4, you need a lot of leaders in that dressing room, and he won't be there. And Philip Osson went the year before, so there's definitely a changing of the guard in there at the moment.
Yeah, and speaking of changing of the guards, Colin Bonner, as we know, is in, and I suppose this is the first weekend that he got to have a proper look at some lads that both are on the panel and aren't on the panel. Shane, you were at the Miller Shield games. It was North against South and Mid against West. Do you feel that it was a useful exercise for Colin Bonner in terms of trying to find players?
I definitely think it will be. I was at the North v South game and I was at both of them, but it can't do any harm. Like, if these games weren't going on, they'd have to wait till the 8th of December before they collectively train to start, maybe assessing guys. Like, so look, they're getting a 3-week head start. Look, from the game I saw, like, I think there's no doubt the fact that the North team had a few guys that were on the previous senior panel certainly helped. I thought Barry Heffernan was head and shoulders the best player in the field while he was on the 25 minutes he was there. You could see his class, the likes of Robert Byrne too, Alan Tyne, and the lads at James Quigley, the lads that have the bit of know-how, the bit of intercounty training experience, they stood out. Like, and on the flip side, like, the South had very little of that, and probably Sean Curran from a few years ago is probably the only one that had. But look, if you're looking for fresh faces, I know there would have been the likes of Philip Hickey. I thought from the North side, was very, very good. Like, I would have thought, like, he's a good, solid, dependable forward for Nina, but I wouldn't have seen maybe an intercounty caliber player in him. But look, he was very, very good last weekend. 2 goals scored, but his creative work was excellent, and he's foraging. You have David Gleason, who won an under-21 All-Ireland, a corner forward in 2018. He plays an awful lot of rugby in the off-season too. Like, he's diminutive, but like, he's a quick turn of pace, and he can score as well. I thought he did very well. I thought it would have done Billy Seymour no harm, maybe to particularly second half, and his work rate there, just to I suppose to put himself in the eye line there again too. Look, from a South point of view, I was very interested to see maybe how Dylan Walsh went, because like, I would have been a big fan of Dylan's a few years ago when he was on the Tip minor teams, and look, maybe the fact that Ballingarry had slipped from Orient to intermediate, sometimes you can go off the radar, but look, he got 5 points in play, and I just think he's one of those corner inside forwards who's not short on a bit of confidence, and there's a bit of a good arrogant streak in him. If you know, he believes he's a quality forward. So I would have thought, I thought Hickey and Dylan Walsh probably were the 2 standouts, and maybe I think, even though you wouldn't say he's relatively new, I thought Alan Tynan for his first half performance was very, very good as well.
And just, I'm not sure if you saw either of the 2 matches, or any of either of the 2 matches, but just for big clubs and small, Shane kind of mentioned it there in terms of, like, some clubs that might not necessarily be on the radar. So I don't know, teams that are getting to county semi-finals regularly, Killadangan, Thurles, so on and so forth. Those players are always going to be pretty much in the shop window. But even, looking at the Mid and the West, there's a lot of smaller clubs there that may not necessarily always be mentioned. Gertnahoe, Glengoule probably aren't seen all that often by the wider Tipperary public. I suppose lads from your own club, Mike Harkey, Reece Shelley and Jack Morrissey were playing. Ballynahinch, as Shane said there. A load of different clubs, Newport, across the board being seen there. Do you think it's a useful exercise, this Miller Shield?
I definitely do. I think it's the 1960s or 70s since it's been played. In those days, there wasn't a plethora of competitions, so there was something to be played for, and you probably had all the senior intercounty players involved at the time. On this occasion, I think definitely, as you say, it's an opportunity for, Shane says, some of the maybe, panel members there the last couple of years to try and reinforce their place. But more to the point, as you say, there was 3 lads from my own club, McCarthy. I think Gertnahoe had 2 or 3 Clonmel, I know, definitely had 2 starters on the mid-side. So it's definitely given these lads a chance to play, maybe in what you call higher company, and see how they get on. And, for the most part, I think, there's a lot of players did put their hand up, but you're going to have to see, I suppose, over the next 2 weekends, is that something that can be consistent with? Anyone, I suppose, can play really well on one day. It depends on who you're marking or how your team is going. But, just to see them in different scenarios, I thought certainly the mid and the West game was, obviously looking at the scorelines, was far more competitive. And while the West were the better team, certainly there was a lot more bite in it. I think the North, in that match, were put in a spurt, I think, of 3 goals there after the water break in the first half. And by half time, the result wasn't really in doubt. Having said that, there was definitely, a few lads put up their hand. That I thought one of the lads that I thought did well for the South was Sean Kennedy of St. Mary's. I think he got 5 from play. And another fella, grandson of Pat Stakelum, was Tom Stakelum, McKinnon Hall, centre forward. Again, a big chap, bringing something different. I think he got 3 points from play, but his overall contribution, laying off the ball, a general ball winner. And again, we all know 15 lovely hurlers is not going to win you anything. So you do need that mix. And I thought, there were certainly a few different hurlers put their hand up. Another fella, Rian Doody from Captain White, I thought, did well for the West. Again, kind of a ball winner. Reminded me of and this is maybe a big comparison. Reminded me of Gerard Hegarty when he was like 19 or 20. Big guy, can win the ball, but kind of raw. But maybe there's potential there. We've seen Gerard Hegarty, how he's developed year on year to be hurler of the year now. We're looking for players like that. Thomas Cleary is another fella, big guy from North Tipperary, ball winner. What you're looking for is these type of lads. Can they make the grade? With obviously top class training, which they're going to get in with the new setup in Tipperary. So it's trying to pick these guys out when maybe it's not the most obvious, and see how they do in higher company. And I think it's definitely a worthwhile exercise, and we'll see how next Saturday goes now when the teams meet again.
So Shane, I'm just looking at the groups of selectors for the teams. With the North, it was Willie Ryan and Seamus Hennessy. With the South, Kenneth Brown, Sean O'Regan, Brendan Cagney. Then for the mid, it was Eamon Corcoran, Noel Morris, Gary Myrna. And with the West, you had Brendan Bonner, Will Ryan, Brian Leamy, and Ger O'Neill. So, what would, if any, involvement would Colin Bonner have had in this? Is it purely standing back, and was he involved in appointing who would be over the different teams, or how was that done?
Oh, I thought well, I suppose the idea definitely came from Colin. So, I would think between all 4 squads, I'd say 75-80% of the players would have been earmarked by the county management themselves. Maybe they would have deferred maybe to the selectors within each of the 4 divisions. Then maybe, is there any other player that you think is worthwhile having a look at? So from that point of view, they got to see the guts of probably 75-80 players last weekend. There's going to be more guys coming in this weekend that probably couldn't play last week. I think there was about 7 or 8 from the North that were unavailable last weekend, like the likes of Paul Flanagan in Newport. He was at the game but couldn't play. I think there could be Sean. I know there's no under 21 games in the North this weekend, so maybe the likes of Sean Ryan could get a look in there from Temple Derry. He was one from the club championships that everybody was excited about. So I think that some of the interesting facets for me was I believe that Dylan Quirk asked to be played at left wing back for the West team, and we would have, and that we'd always maybe associate him being in the forward, even though he won an under 21 Ireland or wing back. So maybe Dylan feels that he's best placed maybe going forward isn't the half back line, and surely he has the physical presence and the athleticism definitely to play there. And Owen Connolly maybe asked to play in the middle of the field. So I suppose it's no harm to maybe see other guys in different positions, see how they go. And I think the North v West matchup this weekend will be very, very interesting to see. As Ed says, who can back who played well last weekend can back up another good performance. And look, if you can put 2 or 3 solid performances back to back, I think there's a fair chance you'll be in that first training session in Dr. Morris Park after the 8th of December.
Question from Paul Tierney. Would like to have seen Colin English, a former Tip under-20 winning captain, part of the Miller Shield, or is he with the footballer? Would you have any thoughts on that, Shane?
He transferred to Ballygiblin in Cork a couple of years ago, and I think he won
the Junior Cork there.
He won the Junior Cork title, and I think they're going, Mitchelstown are going for the Junior, whatever. I know there's so many different grades in Cork. They're going for a county title, I think, next weekend too. So look, he's one that if you drop off the radar a small bit, it can be hard to get back in. The South had a player from South Liberties playing last weekend, the Barry Cooney, and I know he's originally from Ballyluby, Castlegrace, and he only transferred over to the Limerick club last year. So look, I'm sure if an opportunity comes for Colin English to have a look, if he's playing that well for Ballygiblin, look, I'm sure that the county management will have a look at him. I'm not sure whether he'd be available to play in the next 2 games, but I'm sure, look, if he wants to put his hand up, I'm sure that the South selectors would have him in there, no problem.
Ed, just moving on to another topic, the streaming of the Harty Cup games. What's the appetite been like for that, and was that the reason that you decided to do it?
Yeah, we've been looking at the streaming of, I suppose, games in general. We did do a few minor and under-20 matches there during the summer. Last week we did the Dean Ryan Cup final, which Flannans beat Article Reach in a good game. We did one of the Corniverie, which is the football equivalent of the Harty last week. So, there has been, I think, a good bit of demand. A lot of people can't get to the Harty. Half one on the Wednesday. In fairness to anyone who has a day job Monday to Friday, it's going to find it really difficult to get there. So we're going to show one game, but to be fair, we just said there's 5 games on. If we pick 1 or 2 games, it's probably unfair, maybe the other 3. So, we said we put all 5 on and see what reaction we get. Thus far, the viewership has been quite healthy, a lot better than I would have expected for a Wednesday afternoon, to be fair. Obviously today with 5 matches on at the same time, you're probably going to be down across the board, but I think it gives everyone a great opportunity to watch these games. I was at the Thurles Flannans game in round 1, and the one thing I came away with was I really missed Harty Cup hurling. With a lot of due respect to Inter-County, Harty Cup just brings something different. It's real, tough, hip, shoulder to shoulder. It was really, really tough game, but outstanding skill on both sides as well. And I think Thurles and Flannans will probably be, along with the Cork teams, in the shake-up when it comes to that probably the early part of next year. But, I think the games, and hopefully the bit of exposure that we're going to give to them, actually show people that, these are games that are worth to the quarterfinal weekends. I think it will actually increase the game. So it's, people.
Losing the connection there.
Line seems to be dropping just a little bit out there. Yeah, hopefully that comes back up. Sorry, Ed, I'm not sure if just at the end there that seemed to just jump out a small bit. But Shane, your own thoughts on the Harty Cup? I presume a big lover of the competition.
I'm not getting to as much of it as I used to. Ed, can you hear us there? I think
Ed, can you hear us okay? Maybe Ed might just jump off and jump back on again.
I suppose I'd say I haven't got to as much Harty Cup as I used to, but look, it's looking at the game. I think it's officially knockout today, and you have an all Tipperary tie in Thurles CBS and Our Lady's Templemore and Littleton. So that's going to be. You'd probably fancy Thurles there, Nina CBS are at home to, I suppose, the old Northman of Cork. So that's a home game for Nina. So, and Cashel up against St. Flannans. So you think Cashel are probably up against it. So look, it's you have 5 teams. You'll have 1 tip team left standing after day. Hopefully 3. As I say, I'm sure the under 17 and Brendan, and even up to under 19, Brendan Cummins will be, and Shane Stapleton will be strong observers at these games. So look, it's. The tip schools have had a good record over the last decade, but it's from a tip point of view, you'd be worried maybe the Cork schools are picking up strength the last few years, and Flannans look like they're having a bit of a rebirth too. It'll be interesting to see who's left standing after today's games.
Yeah, Ed, hopefully you can hear us okay again there.
Yep.
What do you think is the future for streaming in the GAA? Because obviously during the pandemic when nobody could go to games, the appetite was absolutely huge. But obviously there's costs involved in streaming in streaming games. So if more people are going to the games, then it raises the question how it's funded. But what do you think the future is for streaming?
I think there's certainly a role. Whether you would stream every game, I think would be a huge question. No more than when the TV contracts are given out. Obviously, they might only show 30 or 40 matches in a given year. So I think blanket coverage of every match wouldn't really work. It's a case of, I suppose, picking out the games, each weekend, or in our case, today we picked them all. But, in normal circumstances, you'd pick the best game and go with it. So I definitely think, something that is going to be here with us, certainly for sure going forward. But I don't really see a role in, as I say, a plethora of showing every single game. I think it's a case of select your best games and try and go across. And in the case of Harty Cup, pick out different teams maybe across the different rounds and go that way. But I'm not sure, for example, come quarterfinals, it would make sense for us to show all four at the same time. But for today, it's a worthwhile experiment, and let's see how it works out.
Plus, you want people to go to the matches, there's always you always have a great atmosphere. I know the Arts School Reach lads they're pretty loud when they get a group of them together. I know I suppose we're still in strange times, but hopefully this is the last year in which the Harty Cup will be affected, and we'll be back to proper next year.
Okay, let's move on to the Tipperary hurling final replay this weekend. Obviously, I'm sure everyone in Tipperary knows the situation with the Clonmel at this stage. 2-17 to 23 points. Thurles Sarsfield's had those couple of goals in the first half from Dennis Maher. Looked like they were going to kick on. Especially Loughmore were probably struggling at times in the first half. An awful lot of wides from 100 yards, as I was saying last week when we had Shane Mcgrath on. Ed, we didn't get your thoughts on it. So just to reflect on that final, exciting game, great finale. What were your thoughts on the game?
Yeah, I suppose it epitomised the spirit certainly of Loughmore, given Dennis Maher had 2 goals and a point scored very early. Was it 7 or 8 points? They were down, so I thought Loughmore did really well. Certainly in the first half they hit a few wides. There's 4 points they were down at half time. The one thing I did say, I suppose, to the person beside me, with about 5 or 6 minutes to go, I think Loughmore went 2 points up, and the momentum seemed totally with them. And the person beside me, I said, if Thurles get out of this with a result, they're going to win the Munster Club. They did get a result, albeit not the one they wanted. But people forget that Thurles got 3 points finishing up there, and they did win that last 5 minutes, which I think in the past, Thurles, especially at this time of year, we know their record in Munster Club isn't great. And obviously these games now have been playing a bit later in the year than normal. But like in the semi-final against Kildangan, I saw them tough it out, and it wasn't something that I wasn't necessarily expecting from them. Going into that semi-final against Kildangan, the jury was still out with me. I've seen them, beat teams well, but I just wondered, when push came to shove, would they really, be able to do it? And they did in the semi-final. And as it's fair to say, the last 5 minutes against Loughmore, it wasn't Thurles Sarsfields had to get the equaliser. It was Lee Mcgrath and Loughmore. And to me, that's something that bodes well potentially for Thurles going forward. I do think that Paddy and Ronan Maher, potentially, I know they might both have had issues the last day with health and injury, but I don't think they'll be as quiet again. And if they can get 1 or 2 of those forwards that maybe didn't fire the last day going, I think Loughmore really will have a difficult task in trying to keep Sarsfields at bay. So for that race, I probably would give Thurles a slight edge to win the replay, but when Loughmore involved, I certainly wouldn't put my fiver or your fiver on it.
Shane, Thurles been up by 8 points after 17 minutes. Thurles of old, they haven't won the county title since 2017. Thurles of old, the aura around them, I'm not sure any teams in Tipperary are going to come back against them, whereas this Loughmore team did. So is that kind of a reflection that the aura is gone, that maybe, I don't know, maybe the quality to completely bury teams isn't there like it was before, or am I being unfair?
I think it's, I don't know if it's an aura thing. I think they're playing a completely different brand of hurling from the one that won the 4 in a row in the middle of the last decade. That was just constant movement. They nearly had opposition teams confused, because they were going short, they were going long, there were guys coming off the show. They just seemed to know what to do with the ball every time they got it. Whereas definitely in the last 2 games, it is more or less get it into the full forward line as quickly as you can. And I think for most teams, that's very, very easy to plan against. Whether you stop it is another thing. And like we saw with Kildangan, found that they probably found it too hard to stop because Paddy Creedon and Dennis Maher were so good in the full forward line. But look, apart from maybe that first 10 minutes, when Dennis Maher got the 2 goals, I thought the Loughmore full back line had dealt with it pretty comfortably. Pa Burke sort of did a lot of his better work sort of out towards the corner when they played the ball into space. Like, and I think that's what I think Thurles will hope to do a bit more of, is use the ball a slightly more better. Maybe not try and mix it up. Don't be trying to use Dennis and Paddy as your maybe go-to player the whole time. Like, so I can agree with what Ed said there at the very start, that I think the team with the greatest scope for improvement from their drawn game is Thurles Sarsfields, because I think if you break the 4 quarters down, Loughmore won 3 of them and Thurles won 1 of them. But like, now Loughmore have momentum after being football champions. What are they? 10? Like, they'll 5 or 6 guys that didn't play last week in the football final, so they'll be coming in a little fresh too. Kieran Connolly and a few more of those lads. So, I think the weather forecast for Sunday is looking frigid altogether. So, like, I think this is really going to be. This is going to be a battle too. I would have gone for Thurles for the drawn game. I'm going to switch sides for this one. I know your friend in Thurles is not going to be happy with me. Like, he seems to be watching our game, and this a lot of the time, if we tip against Thurles, we're ready to be hammered. But look, I just think the momentum is with Loughmore now. I suppose I did say last week on the show, it reminds me of the 2014 All-Ireland final against Kilkenny, that after the drawn game, it was Tip with all the momentum, but Kilkenny with the greatest scope for improvement. And for the replay, that's how it worked out. Kilkenny learned more. So you think if Thurles learn more and improve, you probably think they should win it. But I don't know, there's just something about Loughmore at the moment that says they're not going to be stopped.
Yeah, Ed, what would you do if you're Loughmore? What do you do with John and Noel Mcgrath to get as much as you can out of them? And then if John Maher, who missed the football final with a hamstring injury, isn't available, like, that could be a big blow too.
Yeah, John Maher is the heartbeat of that team, centre back. You know, he was in the second half in particular last week. Or 2 weeks ago in the hurling drawn game, he was unreal. And as was Brian Mcgrath beside him. So I think if he was missing, to be whatever about the football, it would be a serious loss to the hurling. What would you do with John and Noel Mcgrath? I think John, the way it kind of works out in recent times is John kind of spends a lot of his first half, I think even early second half, in around the full forward line. But, for a finish, he kind of comes out as kind of a deep line centre forward, wing forward, in around midfield, winning a lot of ball, and obviously is well able to take his scores out there. I think Noel, for the most part, kind of floats around midfield, wing forward. You might go through a match and think Noel Mcgrath didn't do too much. And then if you actually do a bit of stats on the game, you realise, God, the guy's after getting through 20 or 25 possessions, which is probably the most of any player. So, he's very intelligent, kind of well able to read the play. So certainly I'd be keeping him, around the midfield. But for John, I think ultimately Loughmore, the last day, did well to get a draw without scoring a goal. I'm not sure that they're going to win. They're going to do it on points this time. And for that reason, I think John is probably going to need to spend a bit more time closer to the goal. And if he can rattle 1 or 2 green flags, I think they will be hard beaten. But him on Paddy Maher would be an interesting one, certainly for the 60 minutes, if it ends up like that.
Shane, we've had another week to think about it. Do you see Thurles change? I'm not sure I see too many changes for Thurles. I still think that full forward line is going to play the way it played. Dennis Maher and Pa Burke and Paddy Creedon. Obviously, that was Paddy Creedon's first county final, young man. Maybe he'll have a bigger performance again this day. I see the half forward line being the same way it was. I see Stephen Cahill being midfield. I know Mikey Cahill went back on John Mcgrath during the second half of the last game. I'm curious to see if that matchup happens again. But outside of that change, I think, like, and you mentioned Kilkenny 2014, Tip 2014, Tip played more or less the same team again. To me, I think that's maybe the opportunity for Loughmore. I'm not really sure where Sars are going to change, which means you can kind of, or you should be able to theoretically plan for them.
Oh, definitely. I know I posed the question last week of, like, Thurles are pretty set in their ways this year at Paddy at 3 and Ronan at 6, and whether they would deviate from that and maybe get the 2 of them on man marking roles. Like, if Paddy has to follow Noel and maybe ends up at wing back, will they go down that route, or Ronan goes out to the wing instead of centre back? I don't foresee I don't foresee Thurles doing that. I think, as you say, that would probably give Loughmore a chance. What do you do with we probably think David Corbett is going to man mark Noel Mcgrath again. So what do you take Noel Mcgrath into full forward from the start and take David Corbett away from wing back, or it's that sort of thing is interesting. I would have thought that maybe playing John Mcgrath further out from goal even earlier might help Loughmore, because I didn't think they got an awful lot inside the inside full forward line in the drawn match. Or a lot of their better scores out were from outfield. So do you sort of get Liam, John, Noel, Brian Mcgrath, Kieran Connolly all sort of in tight spaces there, and use their football acumen there to get on the ball and maybe slip the pass into a guy in space and maybe knock the ball over from 60, 70, 80 yards out, because I suppose they probably have the greater scope to be probably more flexible. We know what Thurles are going to do. You're probably not going to play Dennis Maher or Paddy Creedon anywhere else, maybe where the full forward line, where a lot of the Loughmore forwards are interchangeable. They can all spend maybe 5 or 10 minutes between the full forward line and the half forward line.
It's a great opportunity for likes of Aidan McCormick and the Stakehams out in the half forward line to sort of answer anyone who would say that it's down to that full forward line to win it for Sars.
Yeah, well, in fairness, the two Stakehams are quite young hurlers. Aidan obviously has been around the block a while at this stage, so no doubt he'll put in a performance. But the two Stakehams are potential guys for Colin Bonner in the future. Maybe not next year, but certainly I think they're two good hurlers, certainly good workers as well, which is what you need in the modern day. Probably wouldn't do any harm getting into the strength and conditioning side of things, which could take a couple of years just to kind of build up. But I do think they will rebound. Again, Paddy Creedon was kind of quiet the last day. Obviously had an outstanding semi-final, and I suppose has been good up along as well. So it's hard to see it again. But then, someone like Paddy Creedon could go for playoff and
seems to be breaking up just a little bit again there with Ed. Shane, would you fancy taking up that point there in terms of the half forward line for Thurles, maybe showing what they're about?
Oh, definitely. And I think if there's maybe one aspect maybe Thurles will probably like to tweak maybe is their own puck outs. I thought, particularly in the first half, they went down a lot on Brian Mcgrath's side with Conor Stakeland there, and Brian Mcgrath cleaned him out a few times, and I thought it just gave Loughmore a bit of momentum to see, okay, Brian, even with a broken thumb, is able to get the upper hand in his battle there, and if you go along on John Maher, you're asking for trouble as well. So look, it'll be interesting to see if Thurles maybe shake things up a bit, maybe in terms of their puck outs. Will they try and go maybe to the wing backs, or try and get Stephen Cahill or Michael Cahill to drop short into space to maybe pick up the ball? Because that Loughmore half back line is very, very strong. Tommy Maher had an excellent game at wing back in the drawn game, and you'd like to think probably John Ryan was very, very unlucky to lose his spot for the final. And look, I know it is no comparison, but I thought John Ryan had a superb game in the football final at wing back. So look, he might have done the Loughmore management might think, okay, will we go with John's extra physicality in the this time round and maybe push Tommy Maher back up to the middle of the field if we need to. So which means you could probably hold maybe an Evan Sweeney or an Ed Connolly in reserve on the bench, or a Conor Mcgrath. All those things are probably going to come into consideration, in terms of you want that bit of impact off the bench, but this match is going to be decided inside the last 10 minutes.
So one thing then, you mentioned John Ryan and his physicality. I mean, that's something that probably Dennis Maher with his physicality caused a bit of hassle. Has John Ryan ever played full back? Could there be a rejig with maybe Joey Hennessy moving elsewhere?
I don't think so. I think Joey Hennessy's their full back. They're not going to touch him there. I know. Look, I think you take the second goal out of it, just an unlucky slip by Joey Hennessy. He had the position on Dennis Maher, and just one of those things. So and look, he did make a boo-boo for that short puck out, and he made up for it. So look, I don't think we're going to see Loughmore rejigging their defence too much. I think it will be maybe a case of, if John Ryan comes in, it might be one of the forwards being sacrificed, because I think Tommy Maher's playing too well at the moment. I get the sense, like, I don't, in terms of John Maher, I don't think they'll Loughmore will look beyond this game for John Maher. I think they'll put him out there, and look, if he plays well and breaks down and they don't have him for football or down the road, I don't think they'll worry about that. I just think that they'll be just so focused on winning that county championship, first one in hurling since 2013. So I'd be surprised if John Maher is not strapped up and put out there in some shape or form on Sunday.
And there's always a chance too that Ronan Maher, who's carrying a bit of a dead leg in the last game, will just take this game over, isn't there?
Oh, definitely. And it's like you definitely think. I thought Loughmore were clever. They didn't play an awful lot of puck outs down the middle of the field there in the drawing game, and like I don't foresee that happening again either. And you say, like, I did say there was probably more scope for improvement out of Thurles, but look, you think there's probably more to come from Noel Mcgrath, who I would have thought in the final last Sunday and the football final was what I would say anonymous, but not as influential as you would expect him. So look, but that's a lot to. You could put a lot down to the opposition teams to make sure he's not allowed to drift into space from where he's going to dominate things. Like I think Liam Tracy is another one who could have a big game from the drawn match as well. So like look, I just think it all. If we get as good a game as we got 2 weeks ago, I think we're going to be in for a treat. I just hope the weather conditions allows both teams to play to their potential, and we get I suppose a county champion won by talent on the field rather than weather conditions. And I don't know what way you were leaning. Like I just think it's a fascinating build up to this one.
Yeah, well, I suppose Sars did have been able to, like last weekend when Loughmore were preparing to play a football match and playing a football game, Sars were able to sit there and figure out what they're doing for the hurling match next week, get all the bodies right, get everything perfect for this match. So there has to be some sort of an advantage in there that they're pucking ball every night when Loughmore are kicking ball and then having to recover. So how much hurling have Loughmore been able to do since that drawn final? It's probably only last night that they got back onto the field fully hurling again. Now, I'm sure they did a bit of hurling at the end of their football sessions somewhere in the middle of it. But really, how much focus have you put on it? Whereas Thurles are just ball after ball, thinking of not only their matchups and how they're going to expose Loughmore. So that has to give them a bit of advantage. I feel like, based on the drawn final, that the possibility of goals is more on the Sars side than it is on the Loughmore side. And then the injuries to John Maher, Brian Mcgrath, it kind of feels like it's set up a little bit for Sars to win this one. I think if Loughmore were absolutely at 100% here, we're a bit calmer, closer to goal. Ed Donnelly probably Connolly butchered, not Ed Donnelly who was on here, butchered probably setting up a couple of goal chances by taking them on himself the last day. Liam Tracy didn't have his best game. And just, too many long balls from 100 yards going wide. But like, 100% Brian Mcgrath, 100% John Maher, 100% everyone for Loughmore, and I'd give him the edge here. But I just think that there could be big games here for Paddy Maher, like there was on TV there not so long ago. He was and he was good in the quarterfinal on TV, and then he was excellent against Kildangan in the semi-finals. You could have Ronan taking this game over, and then like Pa Burke inside is the difference maker. So I'm starting to lean just about to Sars.
Yeah, look, I think it's a toss of a coin. I think
that's fair.
I think it's one thing for me is how are Loughmore going to address their slow starts? Is like I put it to Frankie Mcgrath after the match and saying that it's 16 weeks is not impacting you at the finish of matches because you're flying fit. Like, and I was just when I was talking to Frankie, the lads were gone for a warm down, and Murtaugh Brennan, their S&C coach, has been lifted into the air at the cup like Sunday, and he said, like, his influence on that group to apart from probably John Maher, they've had very, very few muscle injuries this year, which was keeping them out of matches. Like, so, but I think definitely one thing they have to maybe do something with the warm up is get them up to speed. Like they've just started so slowly in the last 3 or 4 matches, and they've got away with it. And look, but the trouble is, if you sail close to the wind enough, you're going to get burned. And like some of these slow starts are going to end up costing them matches eventually. Like, so how do they make sure they get off to a positive start this weekend? it'd be interesting to see. I suppose I haven't observed a warm up to see will there be are they more relaxed maybe than other ones. Maybe they'll maybe pick up the intensity a small bit, because I think that's another aspect in terms of will Loughmore maybe change things up that way. But then if you go too hard in the warm up, could you run the risk maybe of injury during the match too? Like, so it'd be interesting to see how they go about it.
Yeah, and especially if you've a little bit of fatigue creeping in. I mean, they're young men for the most part, so they're probably grand. But like, I remember sometimes doing particularly intense warm-ups in the first year with Matty Kenny when we had him, and I had to say to him after a while, because I was already in my 30s, and I was saying to him, look, I'm finding I'm starting games and I'm already gassed here, so I'm going to be stepping out of some of this because it just doesn't work for me. So there might be an element of some players we need to just do a very intense sort of a preparation for the game beforehand, warm up, but do it maybe 15 minutes before the throw in, and just sort of so you've time to get that second win, and then tip away maybe for the 10 minutes going into it. It's an important thing, but there's an element of a guessing game. I mean, I'm sure some people in the profession wouldn't agree with that, but to me, like, having played over the years, there's a little bit of you're not entirely sure if it's going to work for you that day.
Yeah, I think that's where the 16 weeks or the week-on-week schedule is hurting them as a start. It was like anything, if you do anything, you're going to be stiff enough the next day you're going out. So I'd say it probably does take them 5 or 10 minutes to get up to speed, and then when they do get the engine purring, they're flying it. And we've seen that at the last 2 Sundays in the finals. Once they get up to speed, they were as good, if not better, than both Sarsfields and Commercials. Like, so. But as they can't afford to be getting off the slow starts, it's going to cost them eventually.
Yeah, I believe Mine Temple 2 are out in the Munster Intermediate quarterfinal this weekend against John Myler's Kilmoyley there. So fresh from their brilliant 1-point win in the Munster or in the Tipperary Intermediate final, they're back out again. Garrod O'Connor, Conor Bowe, Tommy Hamill, Thomas Mead, Kieran Light, they were all very good in the finals. So nice little adventure there.
Yeah, it's out in it's at 1:30 in Temple Toohey, so on Sunday. So if anybody wanted to get to that game, and provided it doesn't go to extra time, you would make Temple Stadium by 3:15. And I know it was something nice posted on Twitter a few weeks ago. There would have been a lovely curtain raiser. Like, I know it's Munster Council and Tipperary County Board. You'd love to think that there was some way in this day and age for 2 separate units of the GA to come to a compromise, maybe on gate receipts, so that you could have had a double header. I'm sure there would have been people in Kilmoyley and even the hurling community in North Kerry would think, God, we go and watch Kilmoyley, and sure, God, when have we ever been to a Tipperary County hurling final? Sure, we'll tip up for the day. Like that small, if you could have a bit of joined up thinking like that. I know maybe you're trying to save the pitch for the big match at the senior hurling final, but look, I think Mine Temple 2 will be a great chance here. I know Kerry, the Kilmoyley are the senior Kerry champions, but they haven't played in a good few weeks. Like, so you wonder how fresh they would have been. And I know Tip's record in this over the years hasn't been great, but I would class Mine Temple 2 as being a very, very strong intermediate team. I think they would easily call their own in the Urine Cup based on what I've seen of them. So I think based on home advantage, I think you've got to give Temple 2 every chance. But I know it would be great for them to, if they were to back up winning a Tip championship. And I suppose, like anything with, you probably would agree with maybe play Macula. I think the hardest game in a post-county is the first round. Like, once you get the first round in Leinster, All Ireland out of the way, you're motoring again. So that's not to say if Mine Temple 2, if they survive this one, there's nothing to say they could go on and run the Munster either. Yeah,
because their final was the 13th of November, so we're only talking a 2-week gap for them. It's perfect. They had time to celebrate their final, then get back into training and go again. And I wondered this across the board now, like Ballygunner haven't played in what feels like a couple of months. When they battered Rowan-Moore in the Waterford final, the weather was gorgeous. Rapparees of Wexford. Was that September? I don't know. It feels like a long time ago. Apparently, they played Ballygunner in a challenge last week and got absolutely battered. Now, Ballygunner are a class team, and I'd say most people would rank them in the top 3 in Ireland in terms of who's going to go on and win the Club All Ireland. But do you think that could be an advantage for Mine here, that Mine Temple 2, that Kilmoyley haven't played in that long either, and across the board that might help the clubs that have played more recently?
Oh yeah, I think that's going to be the fascinating part of of the next couple of weeks is seeing how the likes of Kilmiley, how the likes of say Rapparees and Ballygunner, the clubs that had county finals finish very early, how they perform. Like, so look, I like Rapparees are up against Clough-Bellacalla. I think that's on the telly on Saturday evening on RTE. So I think Clough were actually the favourites. I think, but they have a key player out injured. So but we know the Laois Club Championship is very, very strong. Like Ballygunner, like I think if you write off Ballyh, your peril. Like if you thought that Tony Kelly wasn't going to play in the quarter, semi, and final, you give them no chance in Clare, but they won it. So, but look, I think if Ballygunner come out of Cusack Park as winners, I think they'll be hard to stop. Like, so, I think they're, from my accounts, their eyes are on Munster and on All Ireland. And we know Ballygunner to Ballyhale, I'd say you drive it in about 10 or 15 minutes. So I'd say they have their one eye over the border and thinking like Ballyhale of all these All Irelands, but we're as good as them. But look, we saw it in 2019 when push came to shove and Parky Rin, Ballygunner just didn't have it against Borrisoleigh. So until Ballygunner prove it, like they're only potential Munster and All Ireland champions at the end of the day.
And then a question about the team that goes through to represent a county in the intermediate. So like we know there's all the talk about changing it to maybe a Premier Intermediate grade, so that you know Templederry, who won the tier above the Seamus O'Reen this year, that they would have gone through. And then I look at like the Dublin Hurling Championship. So the intermediate championship was won. So is the third team. So there's Senior A, Senior B, which was won by Castleknock, and then the next tier was won by Fingallians. So the Senior B team actually played the Fingallians, the intermediate team, in a playoff, which went to penalties, funnily enough, and now they're going through. So do you think like Templederry would have had a fair old crack off this as well? Obviously, it's mine Temple too, but just it's interesting to see the potential for this to change.
Oh, definitely. I think I said it last week. I think if Templederry were in it this year, I think they'd have a great chance of getting the whole way to Croke Park and in All Ireland, just because of the scoring forwards they have. And like you think a lot of these matches now, I know the Leinster Club Hurling, I think all those matches being played in Croke Park. Like I'd love to think that.
At the final and
just the final.
In the Leinster Club football, it's semi-final and final.
Okay, yeah, no, I just think like you're probably thinking a lot of these matches are going to be played on the best inter-county pitches. Like you'd love to think that Semple Stadium and Páirc Uí Chaoimh and the Gaelic grounds over the next few weeks will get a lot of the big games, like in terms of being look, we're heading into winter time, and look, you could get some rotten weather, like, and you want, look, if the weather is bad, at least if you had a good pitch to play on, it might make things a little bit easier for the players. So no, it'll be interesting to see how the Tipperary teams get on. I know Skeheenarinky, the junior champions, are going down to Tralee Parnells. I think they must be the Kerry intermediate champions on Saturday as well. So it's, I definitely do think there's probably going to have to be a streamlining across the board coming soon, because I know I was listening to the Examiner podcast on Monday, and they were going through there's 2 senior championships in Cork and there's 3 intermediate grades, and I think they were all, I was confused by the end to know which was the higher grade of intermediate than the next one. And it's all because a club doesn't want to be classed as senior, intermediate, junior. I just think maybe the Croke Park could maybe help counties out and say, look, this is the way it is. You can't have 2 or 3 classes of senior and 3 classes of intermediate. Just stop at the mess and just say senior, intermediate, junior. Like everybody knows what those were. This thing of creating new intermediate within intermediate, I just think it's silly.
Yeah.
All for the want of what a name is, or what you can class your club as at the end of the year. Like, so.
All right. Well, look, that's it for Tippcast this week. Everyone, enjoy the county final replay on Sunday, and make sure to pick up a copy of the Nina Guardian today. Thanks, Shane.
See you, Shane.
Welcome to Tippcast by the Nina Guardian.